Okay, welcome to the webinar. So today we're going to go over some less than freehold estates and freehold estates. So I got Peggy and Pam with me. Good evening, ladies.
Good evening.
Hi,
So,
Joe.
hi. So let me start by asking you guys a question. What are you guys getting licensed to sell?
Property.
Property. Okay. But you don't have a property license. Why doesn't your license going to say property license?
That's true.
So what's it going to say?
Real estate.
Real estate,
Okay,
yes.
what does the real part mean?
Immovable.
Immovable. Excellent. And so the second part brings us to what we're about to talk about, the estate part. So real is immovable, and then you have estate. Okay? So what do you think of when you think of estate? So what comes to mind? So we're getting a license to sell real estate. The point I just made, you're not getting a property license, you're not getting a house license, you're not getting a home license, you're getting a real estate license. So let's break down that word because that's really important for your exam.
Ownership.
Good. So estate has to do with duration of ownership. So you're really talking about you're getting a license to sell things for a certain duration of ownership, that is immovable. Immovable objects for a certain duration of ownership. And that's that broader definition which brings us to the word real estate. Okay? Make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So we have our freehold estates and our less than freehold estates. So estates divide into two categories. Right now, I'm looking at less than freehold estates. An estate held by someone who rents or leases property. Okay? So if you say this really fast, less than lease, 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 less than freehold estate. Okay? You get less money for a lease. One of my cute little memory techniques. Okay? You guys heard that one before?
Yes.
Yes.
You heard it from me though, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. It's just like, okay, so you get less money for a lease. Now, obviously, an example, there may be some super expensive lease that you get, and you may be selling really cheap homes. I don't know. But for your memory technique, less money for leases. You get less money for a lease than you would for selling real estate. Selling a proper home. Okay. So there's four types of less than freehold estates. Estate for years, periodic tenancy, estate at will, and estate at sufferance. Would one of you like to take a stab at helping me define any one of these four?
I could do estate for years.
Excellent. So let's hear it.
That is for a fixed period of time. If so, like maybe a rental property. If someone is renting for a fixed period of time. So say if it was 6 months, they would rent it during the summer, maybe July to October.
Awesome. You completely nailed it. Perfect. Okay. Estate for years is a fixed period of time. People get thrown off because obviously it has the word years. Okay. But really, it's not just about years. Years is just a connotation of time. It could be for months, years, and you gave a great example of a summer rental when this comes up. So let's help me with the other three. What do you guys think about the other three?
I would think that the periodic tenancy is someone who is there just part of the year or during a certain time of the year.
No. That was a good thought because you're thinking the word period, but that's more of like an estate for years.
Okay.
So
I'm thinking periodic. That is the one where it's like it could be week to week, like you're renting week to week or month to month.
yeah, so that's more they're talking about the period. The month to month, week to week. That is what
Okay.
you guys are used to seeing when you rent property. You rent property now typically on a month to month basis, correct?
Yes.
I mean, that's
Oh yes.
standard. You could rent it day to day if you want, but typically it's month to month. That's a
Okay.
periodic tenancy. Okay, that's why I have to give 1 month's notice. It's month to month. So now we have estate at will and estate at sufferance. What do you guys think those are?
The
I
estate
believe.
go ahead.
No, Peggy, you go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking the estate at will is something that was left to someone.
Okay, so that's a will, like giving it to somebody. And this is a different type of will, but we'll definitely touch upon that one. So the estate at will is actually not a good thing. What you're referencing is a really good thing. It's left to someone. An estate at will means they can leave at any time.
Oh.
Yeah. So estate at will means I could just be like, I'm done. I'm gone. See you later. That sounds terrible, doesn't it?
Yes.
Mhm.
What's
bad.
worse than somebody leaving at any time?
Yeah.
Is there anything worse than somebody leaving on a moment's notice?
Not leaving ever.
Right, not leaving at all.
Never leaving.
Right, and that's the estate at sufferance.
Right.
So if you look at these four, estate at years, periodic tenancy, estate at will, estate at sufferance, I have an order from most ideal to worst in the as perspective for a landlord. Estate at years gives you a definite period of time. So the moment you rent it out, you could plan your next tenant.
Mhm.
Periodic tenancy says, I don't know when it's ending, but at least I know it's month to month or week to week or whatever it is you establish. Okay? Estate at will means they can be gone at any moment. Estate at sufferance means, well, they're not gone. Let me give you a more regular term for estate at sufferance. You ever heard the term a deadbeat tenant?
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah, that's estate at sufferance, the landlord suffering. So here we have the estate for years. This goes along with Pam's example, fixed period of time, 6 months, or it could be like dates, like July 2nd to October 23rd. And that's why I have the picture of the nice summer home to go along with Pam's example, because, we have our beach house. So why is there no notice needed to be terminated? Why don't I have to give notice to my landlord telling him I'm leaving?
Because they rented it through those months and they already have an end date.
Excellent. That is perfect. Good. You don't need to know because you already told them when you're leaving the moment you started. Perfect. Okay. And here we have our first question of the evening. You guys excited?
Yes. Yay.
All right. So what do you guys think the answer is?
I say B.
Excellent. Good.
Yes.
Years. What do you guys think?
Periodic.
Periodic tenancy, yes. A.
A.
Nope. So,
Oh.
right. Remember, right here, we have an exact date.
So fixed period of time.
Fixed period
Okay.
of time. Similar to that summer rental. Now, these aren't summer months, but it's still that same idea. It's a definite period of time. So it's a state for years.
Okay.
All right, and here we have that periodic tenancy. Following through with that example I gave, you have week to week, month to month, year to year. Now, in this one, proper notice must be given to terminate the lease, like a month's notice. And like I said, this is more your standard lease agreement you see. Okay, so here's a question. What do you guys think?
Yeah. This one's periodic. A.
There you go. Good.
Yes, correct.
Excellent. Estate at will, this is the guy who bails. Lessee has the right to possession until terminated. The term of the state is indefinite. So you don't know. Now, just so you guys know, this is not legal in most states. And many people think, well, it's not legal. Why do I have to know it? Well, you still have to know things for your exam that are illegal. And for many areas, estate at will is not allowed for the exact reason. Somebody could just say, I'm done, bye. Wait, when are you leaving? I'm out the door right now, as a matter of fact. Okay? You can't really have that because it can be ended any time. In state of sufferance, you guys like my picture here?
Yeah.
It's actually a picture of my brother. Luckily, he's not watching the webinar. Sorry, that's not nice. Okay. Luckily, he's already passed his exam. So there you go.
Oh.
Okay. All right. So the tenant holds over after the expiration of the lease. Tenant does not pay rent. This is not trespass. This is one of what I consider the more annoying things about our legal system. Okay? Trespass means you never had the right to be there. This person had the right, but they lost that right. And what this means is you got to go through an eviction, which is a very difficult process. If there's trespass, you call the police, you say, there's this guy on my property, I don't know who he is, get him off. But this is not that. This is somebody who had the right to be there but now lost their right. So it's not a form of trespass. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
There's a lot of legal cases you can find that allude to this. For example, if you invite somebody in your home, it's not so easy just to kick them out. I mean, it would be rude for them to stay if you're trying to get them out. But legally, you invited them in. And now it's not trespass anymore. Okay. So I have a question here. What do you guys think the answer is for this one?
That would be an estate at sufferance.
Excellent.
Yeah. A.
And Pam, you've attended a lot of my webinars. You're starting to see that the questions relate to the previous concept. So for those of us watching the webinar, really understand the point of these questions, not so much to test you as much as to see the concepts we just spoke about in the form of a question that you'll see on your exam. These are not exactly on the exam, but that type of question. All right, estate at sufferance. Great job. Okay, here we have another question. What do you guys think the answer is?
B, a life estate.
Good job.
B.
Yeah, and that one you should have gone through. Well, I haven't spoken about that one, so there you go. And this brings up a good test-taking technique for the exam.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are going to study a lot, right? We're all going to study a lot?
Yes.
I have been, yes.
Excellent. So here's my little tip for you of the day for your exam. If you don't recognize something, don't circle it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, what I mean by that is on your exam, you're going to see a lot of things that you don't necessarily understand. Trust the books, trust the teachers, trust the webinar, trust the material you've been using, whatever that material may be. Trust that material that you're learning stuff that you're supposed to know. Therefore, if you see something on your exam that's not familiar to you, that usually means you weren't supposed to know it, or it's not correct information, because your materials only give you correct information. Your materials don't give you wrong information. So if you've never seen it before, that probably means it's incorrect information and thus not the right answer on your exam. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if you see something you're like, is that Greek? I don't even know if that's English, that answer. Just cross it out. Don't circle it.
Okay.
Anybody told you that before?
Mm-mm.
No, not really.
But it makes sense if you think about it, right?
It does. Yeah, it makes good sense.
Okay. Oral leases can be binding, but generally leases are written. Okay, so understand the difference between what is legally required and best business practice. So you can have an oral lease. People get this wrong on their exams because that's not good practice. General practice, you always get it writing. But that doesn't mean you can't have an oral lease. So understand the difference between what is legal and what is just good business practice. On your exam, this is a law test. So you have to understand that you're looking for what is legally correct. And legally correct, you could have an oral lease. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sure.
All right. Okay, tenant and lessee have exclusive possession of the property. Landlord is the lessor and has a reversionary right. This gives me two questions for you guys. What does that OR mean at the end of the word lessor?
The owner.
The one who gives.
Good.
It's the giver, like a grantor, lessor.
Good. Optionor.
Yeah, I was trying to remember all those words.
Right. Excellent.
Vendor.
So the landlord is the lessor. So it's the giver. And then it says he has the reversionary right. So he's giving that usage of that property. What does reversionary right mean?
It reverts back to him after the contract is over.
Excellent. Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
You'll hear this word reversionary right when you study life estates as well. and we'll get into that later. I don't want to go on too much of a tangent. But just note, you'll hear it when you talk about landlords. You'll hear it when you talk about life estates. Those are the two big places reversionary rights come in.
That would be A, reversionary interest.
Okay, so let's look at this. By conveying less than his fee estate, so it's a less than freehold estate, so it's a lease, the grantor retains a reversionary right. So this is a fancy way to say what we just spoke about. But remember, we started this by saying less than lease, less than lease, less than lease. Those were the key words we were going after. All right?
Yes.
Okay, valid lease must contain mutual agreement, capable parties, consideration, and lawful object. These are the essential elements of a valid contract. A lease is a contract. Client joint possession. Can your landlord bother you?
No.
What was my example of the landlord that bothered you all the time?
Oh, was it Roper
There you go.
on
Right
Three's
there.
Company? That was good. Yes, done.
Exactly. Yes. Okay, exactly. That was not legal for him to charge in all the time, and then Jack Tripper would fall over and they have some entertaining little skit going. That whole show was on a very faulty premise, because otherwise, people would go nuts if you had your landlord barging in on a regular basis like that. Okay, a lease is a bilateral contract. Both the landlord and tenant have obligations to perform. So what I'd like you to do right now is define for me what is a bilateral contract.
Between two people.
Good, it's between two people. But a unilateral contract could be between two people too. So what differentiates a bilateral contract between a unilateral one? What do you guys think?
The obligation or the understanding between the two people.
What I'd like you guys to remember is this: a promise for a promise.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Use the word obligation, which is good. But let's remember a promise for a promise. A unilateral contract is like a lost dog sign. You lose Muffy, $500 for finding Muffy. That's between two people. If I find Muffy, do you have to give me the $500?
Yes.
But do I have to go look for Muffy?
No.
No, unilateral. This is bilateral. The landlord must provide the service of keeping the property up, and the tenant must provide the payment at the end of every month or whatever contractual period is decided upon. Two promises. Okay, generally when a property is sold, the new owner would have to honor the lease. This is not always the case. Going back to my premise of what is legally right and what is just general practice. Okay? Leases are personal property. What are personal property? Excuse me, what is personal property? So we talked about real property a little bit earlier in this lesson. What's personal property?
Movable, so it would be like a chair.
Chair, couch, table.
Yeah, anything that's
Lamp.
movable.
Okay, but a lease, that's not an actual thing though. So why is that personal property? I mean, it's not a tangible thing. You're talking about chairs, things you could hold, pick up, hug, paint. But a lease is a thing. It's not a tangible thing. So why is a lease personal property?
Because it doesn't run with the land.
Good. So what I'm getting at is it's easy to remember personal property is movable. But that may trip you up sometimes because, as I said, if something's not tangible, it's not necessarily like movable. The better way to remember this is personal property goes with the person. Okay? They don't always go with the land. Leases are personal property as they do not always run with the land. Meaning a lease is a contract with that person, so when that person's taken out of that equation, that lease is not necessarily tied to the property anymore.
Okay.
Does that mean that generally the lease goes through because the tenants want to live there and the new owner wants the income, and so people just let it carry through. But that is not always the case.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Can you sublet or assign your property that you're renting? So you guys are renting my property. Peggy and Pam are renting my property. Can you sublet it?
Negative.
So you say no. Why not?
I believe you can.
So here's the tricky.
I believe you can.
If it's in the contract.
So here's the way it is. When you go to Kinko's, you could go to Kinko's and get a standard lease agreement, right? They sell those things, and you want it. So if I want to rent my property out to you, and I'm not a professional landlord, I could just go to Kinko's, get a lease agreement. If you notice in that lease agreement, your standard lease agreement, it'll say you cannot sublet this property, and then you sign it. Now, what I'm getting at is you signed a contract saying that you wouldn't sublet it. If you didn't sign that, you could sublet all you want. So that's why it says unless the lease forbids it, which is what it says in that contract, you could sublet or assign all you want. Legally, okay, as long as I get my money and the property is taken care of, we're good. But traditionally, I will sign a contract saying you cannot sublet or assign that property. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes, that does make sense.
Excuse my phone. All right. Okay, what do you guys think the answer
So it's really so what you're saying, Joe, is it's really if the lease forbids it. Otherwise,
right.
You can sublet.
Yeah, and it's important you realize that, because going back to that idea of what's legal and what's best practice, technically and legally you could sublet your property all you want, and you could assign your property all you want. But in normal business practice, you sign a contract that says, no, you can't do that.
Right.
So on your exam, when it says, can you sublet a property you lease? Yes, you can.
Okay.
Unless there's something in that question, like you have a word problem that says you signed a lease. So I would look for that. That's a tricky one that can trip you up.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. I would think A.
Nice. Good.
So, Joe, is there a bit of an assumption with that then? Because I initially wanted to say maybe the landlord would need to be, if I looked at C, getting permission.
Yeah.
But I guess that would almost be an assumption. If it's not in the lease, then that is, I guess, an assumption that you can sublease or assign.
So unless it says so, you could sublease or assign. So let's look at this question together.
Yeah.
The person who had leased a property for 3 years had to move out of state before the lease had expired. In reading the lease, there was no mention of either sublease or assignment.
Right.
Got it. I was thinking C too. Yep. No, I changed
All right.
it.
So that gives away that because legally you could sublet or assign, because as long as the money's paid and the property is taken care of, everything's good. But like we said, typically a landlord would say, I don't trust this new person. I don't know them, so you can't do without my permission. So I'm going to put in the lease agreement, don't sublet or assign without letting me know.
Okay.
But in this question, there's no mention.
No mention.
Tricky, right?
Yeah.
I want you out of my property, but I'm a very shy guy. I don't like confrontation. It's just really awkward for me. So what can I do to get you out of my property? I know. I'll make sure the heater doesn't work. Or, oops, there's no more water. That way I don't have to talk to you. What are you going to do? So what's going to happen? So I just turn off the water. You're going to leave, right?
Yeah, it's uncomfortable.
constructive
Well,
eviction,
not always does that occur. Does anybody leave? They may just stay right there.
of which they would be. Well, no, because you'd still have the right to be there. I was going to say if I want you out but you stay, it would be in a state of sufferance. But in my example, it doesn't totally go with that. So the landlord either does something or fails to do something that he has legal duty to provide. This is constructive eviction. Is this legal? Of course not, but there's still a word for it, and there's
Right.
still a process to go about dealing with this. So if I make it unlivable as a sneaky way to get you out of the house, it's called constructive eviction. Okay? You'll also hear the term constructive notice come up in your materials. When you hear that word constructive, it's basically taking action without talking to the person. Okay, without directly confronting them. Okay, so you have different lease arrangements. Gross lease, net lease, lease option, and percentage lease. What do you guys think these are? What do you think?
I believe gross lease is when the tenant pays a fixed amount, like a flat rent.
Would you say that's the one that's most normal for your standard lease?
Yes, yes.
If you did, you'd be correct. Good. Okay, so what's a net lease, a lease option, and a percentage lease?
I owned a business, so I remember net lease well. All I think is always triple net.
Okay, well, why do you think triple net?
Because it is, let's see, so the tenant pays the taxes and I believe the insurance
Good.
and maintenance
Nailed it.
and the rent.
Right. So that's why it's called a triple net lease. Okay? Taxes, insurance, and maintenance. But really, it's just a net lease. There's no difference between a triple net lease and a net lease. It's just a net lease.
Right.
Gross lease, a tenant just pays a fixed amount. Okay? $1,000 a month. That's it. A net lease, the tenant pays variables. This is more consistent with a commercial property. Okay? What's a lease option?
Option to buy, lease to buy.
Good. Excellent. We'll talk about that in a second. And what's a percentage lease?
Percentage of the place, a percentage owned.
So this would be, I'll give you a hint. This is for commercial properties.
Oh, it's in the percentage of the revenue that they
Good.
make.
So it'd be like a percentage of the revenue. Excellent.
Oh.
Okay, so here we have that gross lease. Tenant pays a fixed amount. Landlord pays for expenses such as taxes, repairs, and anything else that comes up. Okay? And what's the answer here?
A.
Yes, A.
Good job. Good. Here's our net lease. Tax, insurance, maintenance. Often referred to as a triple net lease. And I have my picture of my commercial building. So you get the idea. This is more for commercial property. This is not standard for a residential property.
I still have to say A.
I'm thinking C.
Good. C.
Aha.
There you go. I mean, in standard lease, does the tenant pay the taxes?
No.
No. And this one didn't mention the insurance and the maintenance, but the taxes were there, which would say, okay, there's something above and beyond the normal rent amount. So you'd say, okay, so that'd be a net lease. There's the percentage lease, a percentage of gross receipts. So they pay based upon how much money the store brings in. Okay, what do you guys think the answer is here?
That is D, percentage lease.
Good. Excellent. I can feel it. We're all going to pass. We're all going to pass.
Yes, yes, yes.
It vibes through the computer. All right, a lease option. Here we go. The tenant has the option to purchase the property. Okay. So why would I do a lease option? Well, here's why. So, Peggy, I want to buy your property. Okay.
Okay.
You say, you know what, Joe, you're a great guy. I totally want you to buy my property. It sounds great. It's $500,000. All right. You with me so far?
Yes.
But then I say, whoa, $500,000. That's a lot of money. But I really want this property. And then you say, Joe, you got to pay it. I mean, that's just what it is. But I really like you. So I have an idea. And I say, okay, Peggy, what's your idea? Well, what are you going to do if you don't buy my property? I said, we'll have to rent a property. Okay, so here's what you're going to do. You rent my property for $3,000 a month. Okay? And I say, oof, that's a lot. $3,000 a month. And you say, yes, but hear me out here. You want to buy my property, correct? I say, yes. Well, at the end of 1 year, that $3,000 will be $36,000. Okay? And I say, yeah, so? Well, that could be the down payment for the property that you don't have right now. And I say, okay, great. So I'll rent your property for a year. At the end of the year, I would have given you $36,000. And now I have the option to purchase it. Sound good, Peggy?
Yes.
Okay. But there's a problem with this. What if I just walk away and I just say, you know what? I don't want to buy the property. I want my money back. I don't want it. Can I do that? No.
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 Unless it was in the contract.
Right. And it wouldn't be. Because what you're strategically doing is you're going to say, give me $3,000 a month. Even though your property normally rents for like $2,000. But you want to make sure I buy that property. So you say, hey, if you're serious about buying my property, you shouldn't mind paying a lot because that's going to end up being your down payment. It'll all go towards the property. So at the end of this lease, I have the option to buy it. But if I do not exercise my option, I just would have paid an extraordinary amount in monthly rent for that property above and beyond. So that's usually how it's structured, and it's a lease option. The consideration could be monthly payments, consisting not only of rent, but even an overage of money up front that could be applied towards that down payment. And here's the interesting thing about this lease option. So I rent Peggy's property for a year. At the end of the year, I want to exercise my option. On title, how long have I owned that property?
You haven't owned it yet.
So that's what's interesting. It reverts back. So if I exercise that option, I would have owned it on title for a year. Title will revert back to the time the option began. And that's what a lease option is. So technically, I never rented it from you. I owned it the whole time.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah. In a tough market, it's a strategy a lot of people use. When you're trying to sell a property for a high price that people can't afford, it's a way to work out a different way of doing things. Say, how about you rent this property for a year? And then if you're serious about buying it, at the end of the year, exercise that option. But if you're not serious about buying it, then you would have just paid a lot of money in rent that you probably could have gotten for less on another property.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So that's what I have today for less than freehold estates. And we're just about at 7 o'clock my time. Do you guys have any questions you want to ask me?
I don't have any questions, but I sure do learn a lot from you.
Well, I'm glad. Good. And then another time we could do the freehold estates if you guys like, or do water rights or another topic if that's something you guys would be interested in doing. And you just let me know what time works for you.
Oh, yeah, I'd love that. I haven't done any water rights, although I've done some flashcards on them, but I haven't done more than that. So that would be an interesting topic. I'm headed into deeds. I got some stuff off your website. and I'm
Good.
now studying deeds and titles right now.
Excellent. Okay,
So
good.
that's good.
So are we good to go for today? What do you guys think?
We are great. I'm
Very
good
good.
on this
Thank
subject.
you.
Yes.
All right, so let me know when you want to do another webinar, and I'll try to accommodate. But for now, this is Joe with prepagent.com. Changed the domain name recently for those who've been following. And I hope you guys got something out of it. And I'll talk to you guys soon.
Awesome.
did.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Joe.
Thanks.